Welcome to our fourth episode of Inside Illustration. This episode is part of the site-specific season of Inside Illustration, a biannual suite of content created by the Association of Illustrators. We are a UK-based organisation with members from around the world, supporting illustrators across all areas of their professional lives, including contract reviews and advice on licensing, as well as staging events, campaigning for illustrators' rights, and the running of the annual World Illustration Awards. In this session, we're exploring the impact of illustration in a physical space, how that can be used to impart a message or draw attention to an issue, and the challenges and positive aspects of creating murals for the artist. We're talking to two artists with different styles, incorporating realism or more decorative elements in their artworks, both with the aim to tell a story and make an impact. A reminder to AOI members that you have exclusive access to the full range of content for Inside Illustration at theaoi.com/inside-illustration, where we have in-depth articles, a range of resources, and the opportunity for members to take part in an exclusive creative course on site-specific illustration. I'm your host, Rachel Emily Taylor, artist, writer and course leader of BA Illustration at Camberwell College of Art. I'm delighted to welcome two guests who are muralists and illustrators, Nikwe Dreff and Louis Michel. Nikwe, would you like to introduce yourself first?
Hi, I'm Nikwe. I'm a visual artist. I came into art via the graffiti movement, started in 1985. Did various different aspects of visual art. At the moment, I'd say my focus is on my studio practice and painting large-scale murals, which are predominantly figurative and portraiture. I'm also an illustration lecturer at Portsmouth University.
And Louis?
Hey, how's it going? So I would call myself an artist, because I dabble in lots of different formats and medium. I've been painting since I was a kid, making art since I was a kid. I studied fine art down in Falmouth in Cornwall, and currently I'm living in Margate.
Louis and Nikwe, you've both got impressive bodies of work, and I'd love to start our conversation talking about a substantial commission you both worked on, the Rise Up project in the seaside town of Margate, highlighting ocean conservation and biodiversity. Louis, you were the artist lead on Rise Up. Can you tell us some more about the project and how the artists were selected?
So, Margate is in the borough of Thanet. It's an up-and-coming space that a lot of the creative industry are sort of navigating towards. And so I moved there about 4 years ago with my partner. And being that I paint a lot of murals and I've always had it in my head to sort of want to inject a project into specifically a coastal town. After having lived in Cornwall for so long, that was something I wanted to always do. So when I got to Margate and I saw the end terrace buildings, I thought this has to be done. It's not really so much a commission, because a commission for me entails more financial benefit for the artist in question. This was more of a way for me to bring together artists who, firstly, I massively respect, but secondly, who I know are either dealing with environmental or humanitarian issues with their work. So as individuals, we have very strong presence, but collectively we're so much stronger. So this was an opportunity for me to get these artists, and a lot of them are very close to me, together for a period of a week, and to use our work as a metaphor to encourage change and actively encourage a local community to look and self-reflect about how they deal and live with the ocean. That obviously a lot of plastics come into play there. So we were using the opportunity to highlight the work of a local CIC, which is Rise Up Clean Up Margate. I'm a part of that as well, but it was an opportunity for us to use this as a way in which to identify the work that the CIC is doing and to exemplify ways in which that things could be better. So the art is multifaceted. It's a way in which to nice up a space and make people feel like their community is prettier, more kind of a beautification project, but it's way more important that it's an activation project. So that's how the whole thing sort of exists and came about.
Great. Nikwe, how did you approach your mural for the Rise Up project?
I mean, Louis had been discussing the idea of the project, from a very early point. By the time we spoke about it, it evolved into a residency and was a lot bigger than I think even the initial conversations. So it was totally inspiring. I think collectively we were covering as many different aspects of this conversation as possible. I discussed certain ideas with Louis, and in Thanet, the idea of rising sea levels was something really important that I thought that I could definitely address. So just went and did my research and then came up with some ideas.
I don't mean to interject, but one of the really specifically cool things about what you landed on by doing the rising sea levels is the fact that Thanet is once traditionally the Isle of Thanet, and that as rising sea levels rise, Margate and the Isle of Thanet will thus be an island again. And so your mural very much exemplifies something that is coming. Like, it's not a question of this might happen, it will happen. And so it was illustratively very on point, and I think very, very, very important that you painted that specifically in Margate so that people are aware of what is to come.
Yeah, that's really interesting thinking about the place, and that kind of puts it in perspective for a lot of our listeners as well who might not have known that. And in the work as well, Nikwe, your piece, I know portraiture is really important, and in this piece you've got, is it 2 children? But did you get particular models to model for you for that work?
Yeah, I mean, for the most part, my work is always, I think that's what people know me for, is that I paint real people in the street, as opposed to like at this present moment, made up characters like I did back in the day, or found images. These are real people that I base my work on. So Lewin connected me to the People Them Collective, which is a collective, Margate collective. They suggested 2 young girls. Obviously, we consulted with the mothers and they absolutely loved the idea. And then we had a photo shoot with a photographer called Lorna Allen. So together with my direction and Lorna's photography, I'd already made a mock-up. And then we basically took them some photographs, reference photographs based on my mock-up. Because obviously, with the particular wall, when you're painting a mural, you've got to think about the wall itself, which has every wall has its own qualities. So I wanted to do a piece of artwork that really was a right fit for the actual wall. So that's why we re-photographed and I was able to direct.
So a lot of your work, you'll use photography as a reference point.
Yes.
And then again with your mural for the NHS campaign, and I know that's raising awareness about sickle cell disease affecting African and Caribbean heritage, depicts actual blood donors.
That's right, yeah. All these are the people who have been, collectively, I think it was over 500 units of blood that's been donated. So one of the subjects had been donating blood for the last 20 years. So, really inspiring people. They were all from different parts of the UK. And I photographed them individually in my studio and then made a composite that, again, was the right fit for the wall.
So, yeah, having those real people in your work's important.
Yes, definitely.
Also, for both of you, when creating a mural, what are your intentions in terms of reactions from viewers?
For me, I think to say that I don't care what people think, I don't think that's true. I think definitely I have the community and the public in mind. But definitely I think the starting point is always what I'm trying to say with the work. So it starts with that, and then there's always that consideration. And then I think for me, it's always making sure that all the stakeholders are considered.
Yeah, I would say that for me, because my work's pretty illustrative and very colourful, and it's an animal, I think that I've created a void of there not being a dislike for it. Mm-hmm. That's not to stroke my ego, it's just that it's easier for me to put that in place, and it's created a softer approach to be able to have very serious conversations. But then I add a layer to that whereby when I visit a space, because I do travel a lot with my work, that I look for things which are relevant to the community. So whether that be a species which is endemic to that land or that area as a starting point, as a jump off, but then more importantly, there's hundreds and hundreds of little paintings inside a bigger picture. So therefore, all of those little patches are, or not all, but a lot of them are specifically relevant to the space and place I am. Mm-hmm. That gives me an opportunity to draw in a much wider audience. So for me, I can't think of anything worse than causing discomfort or dislike for something that I've left in a space that I never have to ever be around again. And I think it's really important that the community and the environment that our art exists is appreciated and respected. And I think, again, from organising the mural project in Margate and living now, this is a different thing. I'm now living with 18 murals that I'm responsible for. And thank God that everybody likes them, because otherwise it could be many sleepless nights. But it's interesting as, like, when you paint in a big city, there's so many people and there's so much going on. You don't really get to terms and understand what people's reaction is to the work. And when you visit a place and then you leave, you definitely don't. You just see people's opinions on social media, or maybe someone in hard press media. But when you live in the town where you've injected that, and you're seeing people's actions change in the way in which people want to walk down a certain street now because there's a mural, that's really special. And again, that comes down to the curation. I knew that the artists I was inviting were going to come with that level of consideration for community engagement.
So there's a responsibility to the place when you're leaving something kind of behind. So thinking about your work as well, it was really interesting hearing about the complexity of the content of your work. But when did you feel you'd got to the point where you could scale it up to being a mural? Were you working smaller first?
I was thinking about this question, and it's for me, it's really interesting, because really the start of me painting on walls started off as graffiti.
Right.
So I started to think about, okay, what was my first piece like? And, it was awful. I didn't know what I was doing. At that point, we had no information. So you were literally looking at a photograph and trying to work out how it was done. I'd say from that point, 1985 to this point, it's been incremental. It's been incremental in scale, incremental in understanding how to use the space, how to apply an idea to a wall, incremental in my materials. One thing that happened is that for the most part of me making art, it's been either predominantly spray paint and then oil paints in terms of my studio practice. But then at the Rise Up residency, I actually started my mural in spray paint. A large proportion of it was done in spray paint. And I looked at it and it wasn't working. So I had some conversation with some of the other artists, and they said to me, why don't I do the whole thing in brush? So I ended up doing the whole mural in brush. And since then, I haven't actually done any more murals in spray. So it's constant evolution, and it's definitely incremental. Now I'm painting murals, some of the biggest murals I've been painting recently in brush. I never thought I would have done that like 2 or 3 years ago prior to the residency. So it's all incremental.
Yeah, I think that's really poetic how you said that. It's one chapter at a time.
Yeah.
And it's organic. So when I first thought about going in, quote unquote, scale up, it wasn't really scaling up. It was as far as I can reach without a step or a ladder. And then I was like, well, I need to bring a ladder with me so I can get taller. And then it's a scaffold. And then you get invited to do a project where it's a cherry picker and you have to get a cherry picker license. Then it's like a 10-story building in Houston and you're like, oh man, I just did that. As you go through your journey, it's like that famous saying, don't run before you can walk.
Yeah.
And I think that it's the same thing. And even like with any art form, it's learn to draw. Yep. Once you learn how to use a pencil, then you learn to use a brush. And then you just keep changing your medium. And I started using spray paint. I always loved graffiti and I did some really bad pieces when I was a kid. But for me, like learning how to use spray paint came way later. And it came because I was just bored of using a brush. I wanted to try a different medium. I have a very explorative mind. And so I used to take brushes and spray paint out together, and then I did it the reverse of what you've done, Nick. I got rid of the brushes because I wanted to learn how to use this medium, and now I'm kind of annoyingly pinned because I would like to free myself now of the spray paint, but annoyingly I'm pinned in whereby I actually am not convinced I could achieve the scale in the time frame that a lot of these projects want us to do pieces in with my style, because it's so layer orientated that the brushwork doesn't dry quite quick enough. But I'd like to get there maybe. So, I mean, like you said, it's chapters. It's each moment to moment. And
thinking about that and kind of the different chapters through your work, I was thinking a lot of our listeners might be interested in the challenges for your first murals. So things like understanding how an image might work at scale, practical aspects and materials. But I guess if you came at it from graffiti, that might have almost given you a upper hand with knowing how things work on a wall.
Yeah, yes, definitely. There was a transition from when I was almost only doing lettering. While I was doing graffiti, what I was essentially, how I view it is I was doing lettering, what we'd call characters. So these were made up figures, faces and figures. They weren't based on real people. And then there was a switch to what I'm doing now where it was only based on real people and it's figurative and it's portraiture. So what I would say is this, is that like, there's many ways to make a mural. I would suggest that people is to do your research. Yeah. There's so many ways to do that research. Even if the first port of call is YouTube, there's so many step-by-steps. We didn't have those things when we were started. There's literally so many videos of people starting from a blank canvas, blank wall to completion. Learn the different ways that it's done. Louis mentioned about people project, people do doodle grids, people use masking tape. There's so many different ways that people do murals, but the more tools you have in your toolkit, when you go to different environments and different situations, then you'll be able to pull those out. You know, some people, we've seen it, where people work in a particular way and then you put them in a certain environment and they can't do it. Say, for instance, you're used to only projecting your work and then you get to a situation where there's not enough space. Like I've gone to do that, like potentially I've gone with a particular approach in mind and then I couldn't do it because the wall, the environment, the wall behind, whatever, the lighting, whatever it is, didn't allow what I had in mind. But I'm able to then draw for something else. Yeah. It's really important to do our research and get the knowledge of how to do as many approaches as possible.
I guess it was like you mentioned in the Rise Up one, you went from spray to brush.
Yes.
So was that looking at the kind of the wall or just in the moment you made that decision?
It was an aesthetic thing. It just didn't look right. Things like trying to paint the sea in spray didn't make sense. And I realised what I needed to do is actually do it with brush, with a little touch of spray here and there, things like that. But I could make those decisions because I was abreast of both things. You know what I'm saying? So it's really important, like I said, to have as much in your toolkit as possible.
And Louis, do you have any thoughts on that as well?
Yeah, so I think it's interesting because when you actually look at this word muralism, it's become a current thing to call these paintings. And pre-graffiti, or people using spray cans, or vandalism, or however we want to terminize it, it was always a mural. So there's been this weird moment in time when painting on a wall was not a mural anymore, and now it's reverted, and now we're calling it a mural. And I think that sometimes we're trying to hyper-intellectualize the fact that we're painting a wall. And to me, I mean, I call them murals. I don't know how you feel about this, but we've gone through this moment in time when everything was street art. And we've pushed that and repelled it so hard because of one reason or another. Or not everyone has, but a lot of people have. And so now we're in this new urban contemporary and muralism, and it's just another sort of terminology. And I think ultimately when you get to your space, your wall, and whatever it is that you are trying to achieve, I think picking up on what you said, it's way more important to have a toolbox of methods and being able to approach it very free-spirited and to not be confined by rules and terminologies and expectations and what you do with it after, how long it lasts, how many likes you get on your social media platforms. It's about an expression of something that comes from deeper within. And in many ways, I've slowly over the years see very little difference between my studio practice and my outdoor practice. And for me, they're very much one and the same, to the point whereby when I then go and do exhibitions, I then bring in something else. It then becomes an installation piece. But that only becomes easy for me because I feel like I'm installing artwork into the public domain. And if you think about the context of where you're putting that work in the first instance, i.e. your community, you're kind of doing installation work. So a mural is sometimes just a form of install. It's an installation. So I don't know, I find it a bit of a funny one when we're pinned in on being a certain term.
Yeah, to build on that, Louis said there's no rules, which I 100% agree with. But there are also lots of rules.
Yeah.
You know,
don't go over knee quite.
Yeah, I mean, look, the street doesn't belong to any one person. It belongs to us all. So, say for instance, in terms of visuals, when we're walking about, you've got so many adverts. You've also got the graffiti artists, or graffiti writers, should I say, who they believe to some degree that their streets are theirs. Then you've got the quote-unquote street artist or muralist. Now, just those three different groups are all navigating this space. Like, so for instance, someone, you know, maybe hears this podcast and goes, hey, I want to go and do a mural. And they decide they're going to do a mural right in the middle of like a really important piece of graffiti. You're going to cause yourself some problems. So that's what I'm saying. So there are no rules, but there are also rules. And that's why it goes back to what I was saying. Is do your research, do your due diligence. I think if I decided I want to, get into going into the gym every day, I'd have to do my due diligence. Any aspect of life, you have to do your due diligence. You have to do your research. So,
and respect it as well.
And respect. So definitely go with the mind that there are no rules, but there are lots of rules. And we can't cover all those rules. These are rules that have evolved over the last 30 years or more. So
and they still might keep changing.
They're constantly evolving, constantly evolving.
And bridging as well. Like, I think that's the really interesting thing is that a lot of different sectors of the things that you identified there, they're all starting to cross and germinate each other. And I think that that's what's really interesting. I think what's problematic, in my opinion, is that we've got new generations of artists who are coming fresh out of school and they're like, oh, I want to be a street artist, or oh, I want to be a muralist. Whereas I didn't leave art school with that mentality. I was like, damn, I'll be lucky if I make nothing. Like, nothing. So for me, it was a case of I'm going to go out and paint outside because I don't want to not be doing art. I don't have a studio. I don't have a client to sell artwork to. There's no point in me stashing artwork in my house for doing nothing. So I'm going to go and paint outside. And then painting outside became a something else. It became an obsession, perhaps. I don't know. But I think that young people or new people who are wanting to join in on this whole, I don't really know what we call it, a culture, a scene, a movement, whatever it is to become more of. I think it's really important, going back to what Nikwai said, is understand its origins and understand whose shadows you're walking in, because there's always respect to be paid, whether you are going to bring something new to it or not. You have to, it's another part of your toolkit. You've got to understand where it's derived from and why everyone's been doing it before you. And it's more important to express yourself than to be a terminology. And I think that's really, really important.
I was also thinking before, when you were both talking about research, would that cover kind of being aware of the communities that you're working with and also the content of the work?
So for myself, we're talking specifically with the Rise Up residency, I went to look at the wall that Louis had given me maybe 4 months before even starting to sit down and do the design. Mm-hmm. The weekend we went to paint, I went there a few days to look at the wall again. And I actually literally stood there for maybe about 20 minutes to half an hour, just standing in front of the wall.
Almost all night.
Yeah. Looking at the community. With this particular mural, it wasn't like, it was literally in a community. Mm-hmm. There was literally houses all around. And once I've done the painting, I'm leaving.
Yeah.
These people have got to live with this painting. They had to be considered. And there had to be some level of understanding on my part.
I was wondering if you spoke to any of them before or during the work.
I didn't have an opportunity on this particular mural, but what you've said is actually a really important point for me, and I believe Lou as well. It's like, I know artists who go and paint murals and they have headphones on. To me, that's just wild, because if you're painting this huge mural, you're going to get someone coming up and saying, oh, what's that all about? And that dialogue, that conversation is going to, inform them of what you're doing, and they're going to carry that on. When they see someone, oh, have you seen that, blah, 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 painting down the road? Yeah, I met the artist, blah, blah, blah. You know what I'm saying? Those type of things are really important. I embed that into my practice. What I mean by that is that, okay, if I know that painting is going to take me 3 days to paint, everyone that comes to speak to me, I need to give them at least 10 minutes of my time, 5-10 minutes. It doesn't mean I've stopped painting. I could still be painting, but I need to engage in some sort of conversation. And sometimes those conversations are longer, and I'm thinking, geez, I've given them my 10 minutes, but I need to carry on. It depends on what the level of the conversation is. Sometimes, I always say this as well. It's I've had this situation where, because people know that we're doing this, or rather we started doing this from ourselves. We weren't getting these big commissions when we started. So we were doing this of ourselves, and people can see that when we do the paintings. So what often happens, people understand that you're giving something to their community. Mm-hmm. Sometimes the communities that we're going to, they feel that nobody's giving, nobody's valuing them, nobody's representing them. And then they see you coming in there, you're spending 2, 3, sometimes a whole week. By the time the end of that week, people have invited you in for tea, people bringing out fruits. I've had all sorts of situations. Yeah. might need to use the toilet. Yeah, here's the key. Literally, that happened in Margate. The person gave me the key to go and use the toilet when I wanted in their house. Can you imagine? They didn't know me from Adam, but I'm here being embraced in the community like that. And that's what the art can do. So it's a beautiful thing.
I'm the opposite to you.
Okay.
I wear headphones. I can't, I have to lock in. It's a mental state. I do it with everything. I'm obsessive. So once I'm on a tune, I've zoned, lock in, and I have to drown everything else out. But when I take the headphones off, then I'm the same. Then I'm like, yeah, I'll chat for 10 minutes, 15 minutes. And I'm like, 10 minutes done. I need to get back on that wall. No, I think engaging with the community is really, really, really important. And even if you're only speaking to 4 or 5 people, those people then speak to someone else and they pass on the message. I feel a bit guilty for being a headphone guy now.
I was actually talking about Louis.
There's just lots of different approaches to it, isn't there?
Yeah.
So I was wondering where you get your inspiration from. I know we were talking about photography, but also do you get inspiration from fine art or, music, the music you listen to?
I don't want to sound corny, but inspiration comes from nature. I've painted animals since I can remember. And for a period of time, I've painted people and I've painted musicians. And here I am now, professional artist, painting animals again. And it's my calling. Nature it's alive in my mind. Like, I obsess over nature. I've spent long periods of time in jungles. I have 300 plus houseplants. To me, that's my therapy, is looking after my plants. Through that interest and desire to want to paint an animal, it then became a curiosity about what animals I didn't know, because I also love research. This guy likes to research too. And so through the desire to research and find and to learn, I was like, oh man, these animals are all on the brink of extinction. And that was a light bulb moment. I always say, once a light is turned on, you're never turning it off. Once you learn something, you can't unlearn it. And it deeply upsets me that not enough people give a shit. And the ones that do care are not active enough or voice their concerns enough to cause a spiral effect of other people to care more. So I'm here to do that. And my art is my tool to be able to do it. So my inspiration comes from what I see around me. Within that, the cultures that I grew up with, cartoons and comics and toys and bright colours and graffiti and music, and sometimes my paintings are named after phrases in songs. I listen to music continuously. I used to DJ. I've got hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of records, thousands of records. It's an obsessive thing again. It's research. So it's the environment of research that influences what inevitably I paint, I guess, is where it comes from.
Nico, did you have any thoughts on that? I know you mentioned photography.
Yeah, photography, before I understood what fine art was, I was looking at comics, specifically underground British comics, and then sci-fi comics like 2000 AD or Tank Girl. Those are things I was looking at when I was younger. I think they definitely are the foundations of how I got into art. I'm an illustration lecturer, so I see illustration on a weekly basis, films. And also, I just really like looking at people. I'm a people watcher. I'm trying to capture the essence of people through the artwork. And the artwork that does that inspires me, whatever that is. If it's drawings, paintings, photography, whatever it is, sculpture.
Thinking again about our listeners, and if an illustrator has yet to do a mural and they're thinking of kind of starting on that, what would be best to include in their portfolio when aiming for commission?
If I'm going to be honest, I wouldn't approach it in that way.
Yeah. That's good. That's good advice.
I knew I was going to say, and who's probably going to say it.
Yeah.
What I would do is, like I said, do your research, try to understand, have a look at what's been done before, and have fun and make work. The thing about painting in the street is, if your work's dope, people will see it. People will see it. They'll take photographs, they'll put it on the social media, and then before you know it, you've built a name. And then once you've built a name, before you know it, you're getting commissions that you didn't even think you'd ever get. When I started painting on the street, in terms of painting portraits on the street, I didn't have in my mind that I was going to be getting commissions from some of the biggest corporations in the world. And that's happened within the space of 7 years. That's not why I started. I started because I just wanted to make the best work that I could. And I wanted to speak to an audience. And that's it. So I think do it with the right heart and the right mind, and the streets will give.
Yeah, and have you had commissions come through from like Instagram?
I can only talk for myself. I'd say people know my work from social media and from the street. Those two things.
Right.
But also I understand that one hand washes the other.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? So you do something in the street, people share it on social media, or people see your work on social media, then they commission you to do something in the street. So one hand washes the other.
Yeah. Louis, do you
phrase.
think the same?
Yeah, I mean, just going back like a minute with the question where it started, and then to emphasize on what I said previously, I think that generations moving forward or to come, if they're looking to create a portfolio to get a commission, like Nico said, it just doesn't work like that. You got to earn your colours out on the street. You got to do before you can get. It's not a come to the table and be like, oh, I'm young and I've got a catalogue of work. And it's like, if you've got a catalogue of work, they'll know you've got a catalogue of work. I've never had to prove myself with, this is what I do. It's got no rules, but different rules.
And also, there's no middle person when you're painting in the street.
Oh, there is. There is these days, though. There's people who are orchestrating stuff and trying to make their peas off like someone else's work.
People are trying to insert themselves as gatekeepers. That happens.
Gatekeepers.
But what I'm saying is that if you have your materials and you have your wall, when I say a wall, I'm saying there's a shop at the bottom of your road and there's a lovely wall, and you say to the shopkeeper, can I paint your wall? And they say, yes. Or can I see your work? And you show them your portfolio and they say, yes, great, do it, do what you want. Once you've made your work and you take a photograph, you can take a great photograph on your phone. Once you've done that and you've put that on social media, there is no middle person. So everybody's going to see your artwork, and it's going to be shared potentially across the world via social media. So there's no middle person. That's the power of it. But with that being said, the most important thing is to make dope work. Just get your head down, make dope work, and just keep growing and evolving, and invariably you'll be part of a community and get the feedback and grow and develop. And whatever you would like to potentially get in the future, that will come.
And at that point that you said that the guy at the end of your road who you've asked permission to paint his surface, shutter, wall, whatever it is, don't be expecting money from him. You're lucky that he's let you express yourself on his property. And I think, again, that's a problem that some people are coming to the table with. They're expecting to be, and it goes both ways. People are expecting to get paid for their work all the time. But then equally, you've got on the other side, people taking advantage of that and expecting us to work for free all the time.
Yeah.
Like I've had, and I'm sure that you've had it ton loads as well, but there's been big hotels opening up in London and they're like, oh, we've got these rooms that we want artists to come and paint in and do this, X, Y, and Z. And I'm like, well, how much are you paying? And I'm like, oh, no, we're not paying. I'm like, how much are the rooms? No, you're not getting my help to like promote you and do your thing better. Like, I'd quite like to get into interior design. I'm not about to start being your interior designer for free. So I think understand the power in being a visual artist and own that. But then at the same time, when you are knocking on someone's door and asking to paint their wall, don't expect that you're not going to get your pocket line necessarily. That comes later. And that's the really important give and take that you have to understand as being fresh to this whole thing is that what you leave will be reaped if it is dope. And that's the important thing, is just to make your work pop out from the rest and be better than everyone else.
Can I just say, one or two listeners might be listening to this and thinking, this is a whole heap of rules. I just want to just do what I want to do. And you can. You can do whatever you want. What we're talking about is our journey, and the journey that we believe that most of the people that we respect, the ones that have longevity, the ones that are making real money, life-changing money from doing this thing. This is the journey and the values that they hold dear to them. That's all we're talking about. Like I said, it all goes back to the thing. There are no rules, but there's lots of rules. So we're just explaining some of the rules.
It's like Fight Club.
Yeah.
There is no Fight Club.
The next question I wanted to ask as well, and interesting to hear your opinion on if you think this is relevant to murals, but I was thinking about how much art direction you might have. But then we were talking about gatekeepers as well. So, I mean, art direction could cover a lot of things. Louis, I'm not sure if you directed the artists in the Rise Up work as well?
Yeah, to a certain degree. I mean, what I wanted was activation, and I wanted it to be stories. I call it the idea of stories from the ocean that the ocean would want us on land to hear. So we put those on the walls. And I constructed an email with about 50 or 60 different case studies, interlinking all the different things. And I found a whole heap of different NGOs and environmentally important people and organisations to highlight. And then I sent that to all the artists thinking I would have imagined this artist is going to go for this. So in the back of my head, I was having ideas, but at the same time, I didn't, and we almost had this point when very early on, I almost was like, I think that Nikwai started to feel like I was pushing him into a certain pigeonhole, and I sort of reeled myself back in and thought, I need to hear that because I'm going to have that same conversation with another 16 artists. So I trust these artists so dearly, and I also trust the community that I had got to know, and equally I think everybody trusted me. And the story was what was powerful. So there was a direction, but it wasn't authoritative.
I looked at it as that you provided a framework
from
which we could thrive in.
Yeah.
And that was evident in the work that was produced. Because, you know, there's this thing, it's like, if you just give total freedom, sometimes chaos can be what comes after. And it wasn't that, it was well curated. So when we're talking about art direction, I don't view your role as art direction. I see it more as a curation.
Mm-mm.
Yeah, and the outcome was evident in what people produced. Definitely, I could talk about that for myself.
Yeah, cool, man. I appreciate that.
Many murals are often commissioned by councils and charities as well. So thinking maybe of them as gatekeepers in a way or art directors. What's your experience of working with those organisations as clients?
It goes back again to this thing I said about putting in the work, putting in those hours, developing your practice, developing your approach. And what you really should, I believe we should all be aiming for, is to get to a point where when somebody comes to you for your work, they're coming to you for your work. Mm-hmm. There's nothing worse, I think, than when you've been working on large-scale murals for many years and somebody says, I saw this artist the other day on Instagram, I really like this particular style, and they show you the style. Do you reckon you can do that? When you become an established muralist, you have an aesthetic, you have an approach. And I think what you really want to do is you want that to be so individual and so powerful that people come for that. That's what I think. Definitely, that's what I would want. I mean, from what I know of your work, that's the same for you, Louis.
I'm hella stubborn. Like if someone tells me to do something, and it happens more when you paint outside, right? Mm. But when you're painting outside in the public domain, if someone comes up to you and says, I've got a kebab shop, can you come and paint like a scene in it? And my answer to them is facetious. I'm like, do you walk into a video store and ask for a pair of sneakers? End of. Can you see what I'm doing? So like, I'm an artist, I'm not a tradesman. And I expect to be treated like that. I don't have problems with people giving me some guidance and some, like, can we try this? But it's reflective in what the agreement of the commission is as well. So I don't know how you do it, but I tier my stuff. So, like, if you want to give me creative freedom, it's going to cost you this much. I'm still going to run by you what I'm up to. I'm not going to just pounce on you something that's a ta-da surprise. But if you want to tell me what to paint, it's going to cost you a ton load more because it's lost its fun for me. And so then mostly we go for this middle ground because then the commissioner feels a bit safer and I still have my freedom, which is a comfortable place to be in. Again, it's guidance and it's like presenting more choice than you could possibly need and guiding someone to get the point that you want and everyone be happy.
Yeah, we're also living in a time of blurred lines. Yeah, so what I mean by that is, Louis said very strongly, I'm an artist. But it's going to be probably a majority of people listening to this podcast view themselves as illustrators, where they're totally happy with direction and being advised by art directors and so on. And that's okay, because I would say the modern mural scene now, on a global level, is a mixture of different types of people. Artists, designers, illustrators, 3D, there's all different types of people coming into this space, which is amazing. Again, this is us. I view myself as an artist, but I also teach illustration. So I understand that there's a different mindset, there's a different approach. what I personally try and do is when somebody comes to me with a request, I always ask them for a brief. Sometimes people give you a brief. Sometimes, we're also in a time where people are quite lazy. Sometimes they just never get around to giving you a brief, but they give you something that you could see as a brief in an email form. Once I have that, I ask myself, I'm going to use this word, very specific word. Is this on brand? Because since 1985, I understand that I've been building a brand. Mm-hmm. Like when people hear the name Dref, they know what that looks like. When they hear Louis Massai, they know what that looks like. So we've been building a brand for many, many years. So I ask myself, is this on brand? And then I also ask myself, do I feel this? Because I've got to a point now where when I make work that I don't feel, it's evident in the work. That's something I've had to learn. Yeah. So once I've asked myself those questions and I look at the brief and it's something that I can believe I can make a good job of, then we'll go into the conversations. But ultimately, I draw the line at where I'm doing something that I'm not going to enjoy doing. And, if you search hard enough, you can find joy in lots of different things. Sometimes somebody comes and there's a request for a particular piece of work and you end up doing something you may not have been thinking of doing if it wasn't for that particular commission. So it's not hard and fast rules. But these are definitely some considerations I think that we both have.
When you were talking, I was thinking about there must be different ways to take this, because with some of my alumni, they're quite recent alumni, but when they're working for, say, like a shop or doing a kind of a mural as a commission, they often have to show the plan before they do it and get that approved. But I guess because they may be newer to it, clients might be more, as you've been practicing for longer, maybe you can get away with that a bit more.
It depends. Like I still have to sometimes do mock-ups for clients. Mm-hmm. Some clients don't request to the degree of other clients. Some clients are expecting literally everything to the millimeter. Again, there's often, I know probably for you, there's pushback because I'm an artist. When I get to the wall and how something looks on a photograph and how it actually looks on a wall is often very different. How it sits in the wall in terms of how it sits in the rest of the environment it's around, sometimes that moves. Yeah, there needs to be some flexibility for me personally.
Thinking about murals, they rarely do last forever. So is there agreed beforehand with the commissioner or where you're working how long it will last for? How long they'll keep it there?
I mean, I've never had that conversation with an individual. Sometimes, again, I can answer this on two different sides of the coin, to be honest. I can talk about it as an artist and I can talk about it as a production person. So from a production perspective, out of the buildings in Margate, I would say 20% were very concerned about the degradation and what was going to happen. So we wrote up a contract with them and said after a period of time, I am free from that contract. But I live in the town. It's very easy for me to check in on them. One mural got a few kids have been drawing on them. The artist happened to be local. She was able to come and fix it. It's done. The rest have not been touched. If one of the walls starts to look like it's flaking and not looking so good, then I'm going to either invite the artist to come back or a different artist to come through. Therefore, the building is going to be kept fresh. I don't expect my artist that came in to have to be concerned with that. That's me as a diligent curator who lives in the community that put on this project, has taken on. As an artist, I always ask for my walls if they're... Sometimes I want to paint a wall that is degraded. I like the texture of it. I know those walls are going to last a very short period of time. I have walls which I think are still rocking in South Africa, and I'm thinking, man, I wish someone would paint over it because it just looks so bad now. But they're preserving it. Yeah. There are other walls which last 5 minutes, 6 months, whatever it is, and you kind of wish that someone hadn't gone and dogged it or painted over it. When you turn around and walk the other way, it's done. I accept that, and I always say to the person whose wall I'm painting, you have to understand that the environment that you live in, if you painted this wall without any kind of illustration on it, like just a white wall, after a period of time, you would have to repaint it. It's the same thing. Just because it's a painting and looks nice doesn't mean to say that it's going to suddenly last less time or more time. If you treat the wall, and all of our walls we treated, like we cleaned them with special cleaning agents we put on that particular paint, that preserves a wall really well. There are other people who have become obsessed with this coating on top, which is anti-graffiti coating, which I absolutely despise. For me, I'm like, just don't put that on my murals. for another discussion perhaps. But the point is that coating is not going to stop the underside of that mural falling apart. So you can put whatever you want on top, but if you don't treat the wall behind, it's still going to fall and flake. So it's the treatment that goes on before we even start painting that's really important. And that I've learned as an artist, growing and watching my murals, some of them falling apart.
One of the first murals that I painted in Brixton was a gentleman called Michael John. And when I painted it, the mural, I actually thought that the wall was stable. It looked stable. But over the years, over the last 4 or 5 years, we realised that the wall isn't stable. And Michael actually works opposite the mural. So he sees the mural every day. And everybody knows it's him now. You know, people do street art tours and they literally go and meet him and talk to him about the mural. And it's so weird because it's like month by month, it's disappearing. Now, when I painted that mural, I literally did it as a part of a series and I didn't have any expectations. You know, I hoped it would stay a few months, but I definitely didn't know it would get to a point of degrading on the wall. And because of where it is and because of my profile has grown since the time when I did the mural, it's now become like a heritage piece in Brixton. So now there's conversations about conservation of that particular mural, which is just, I've been really trying to get my head around that because it's kind of like I've come from a place where I'd go in and paint a train and knowing that that train might not even leave the depot. And the only evidence was hopefully the photo that I got, which wasn't guaranteed in times of film. We've gone from that to like now people are asking me to preserve a painting that I essentially didn't have in mind for it to be preserved. So there's that. The other thing as well is that if you're doing a commercial mural for a big brand, which, you know, some artists do, you know, if you go to Shoreditch, you see a lot of it. Those murals that are done, they have a specific time frame from which they stay. Those walls that have high turnovers, that's fine because, you know, it's safe. It's like a big brand has paid for 2 months. After that 2 months, whoever's controlling that wall will then get another brand to come in and they'll pay and they'll paint over that mural. That is an aspect of muralism that's happening. Then there's that in between where I've been asked to do commercial murals, but I've actually painted community murals with the funding of the corporation, unbranded. And then like they've said, okay, we want this here for 2 months. But there's one I can remember in Brixton, it's been now nearly 2 years. So it's a commercial mural that's actually, the community have claimed it because I never painted it to look like a commercial mural. Even though it was paid for by a corporation, I actually did something that meant something to the community. So again, there's rules, but there's no rules.
But that is what makes you an artist.
Yeah.
Because you are coming at everything you do
From a point of
integrity.
integrity.
And that's what it boils down to. And that is, when I was at art school, I never really understood all the differences, like graphic designer, fine artist, illustrator, photographer, because the lines were all blurred. Now I understand as I have matured as an individual, and it's about integrity. It's a graphic designer will, and I say this knowing a lot of graphic designers who are fond, good friends of mine, and they will do the job that they hate because it's going to pay them, whereas we won't. And if we take money from people, it's because we believe in who they are. And that level of integrity then comes through the visual language, which means that then the integrity is understood by the community and the community keep it.
It's a cycle.
It's a cycle. It constantly feeds itself.
Yeah, one hand washing the other, like you said.
I think there's more, again, illustrators that are thinking more about that and the jobs that they pick up, that you don't want to have something that you don't agree with necessarily in your portfolio as well. So I bet that's happening as well. I'm sure with your students as well.
It's important when you embark on this journey and you're thinking, oh gosh, is this what this illustration journey looks like? I think it's important for people like Louis and myself to say, there's actually another way, but maybe you have to go through that to get to this, and that's okay, because we had to go through some stuff to get to this. I'm saying we can all stand here and say with our chest, we do this and we do that, but we probably didn't do that right at the beginning. Maybe we did jobs that we didn't quite like, but that's what we said about putting in the work. When you put in the work, you get to this place.
And we pretend we didn't do it. And we don't show you.
Yeah, and it's not in the portfolio. This is all pre-internet.
Hush, didn't do that. Done.
As a takeaway for our listeners, do you both have 3 things that are useful for illustrators interested in working on murals to know?
Okay, so I'm going to start with the one that I've been going on about, just so in case anyone didn't hear. So there are rules but there was also no rules. Yeah, so you just got to try and work out what that means to you. Yeah.
The Riddler.
Yeah. I think people starting out, people like us, especially when we're coming from a place of thinking about the environment, be resourceful. So going out to B&Q or anywhere like that and buying paint, it's not cheap, but there's alternatives. If you go to B&Q, you can get mixed tints where they mix the paint and it's not quite the right colour, and they'll usually put like a little pile of paints that's really good quality paint, really nice colours, but like fraction of the price of what it would be if you just got it off the shelf. Most B&Qs do this. Try and find a B&Q, go in there regularly, and if you buy one or two nice colours here and there, before you know it, you've got like a really nice collection of paints for future murals. I found out recently that my local recycling centre, every week they get piles of paint, and you can literally go there and take whatever colours you want. So now my studio is just full of white masonry paint. I don't get anything else other than white masonry paint. My partner's sick of it now. Like, she even took a photo of me. Like, she's like, "You're a little kid in here." So yeah, I go in because there's so much paint in there, but I want specifically white masonry paint for what I have in mind for future murals. So you can get paint, even if you want, you can get paint for nothing. So be resourceful. And I think another really important thing is find a community. You've probably understood from this talk that this is a community thing. You are entering a community. Find a community, and that's how you're going to learn quickly, and you'll learn some of these rules that we're talking about and different approaches. And then once you've got your community, I would say then look for a mentor. Like, I think having someone who can mentor you is amazing. I mentor quite a lot of people, and I see it as a two-way street. Yes, without a doubt, they will learn so much from me because I'm giving them 30 years of wins and fails. Yeah, they're getting 3 decades of that. But also I learn so much from them. You know, it's a two-way street, and I always say that. It's not about me, you know, Yoda, like giving the wise words. It's not like that. It's also me learning new ways and new approaches and being flexible in my approach. A tree that's not flexible, ultimately it might break. So you need to be flexible, you know, with the winds of time.
Mm-hmm.
How do I help that? I mean, you've hit it all. It's perfect. Maybe the only thing I would say is, I mean, we talked about integrity just a second ago, but be you. Don't allow what is popular today, if you're not what's popular, to govern what you want to create. Doesn't matter what is successful going on around you, just be you. There's something I learned. Did you ever read the Beautiful Losers book?
Yeah, I've seen it, yeah.
That book was like, if you haven't read it, listeners, go pick it up, go read it, because it's pinnacle to everything that we are, from the American side. But I think that we've learned a lot from the American side, and weirdly, they are hungry for the European now. They desperately want to copy what we're doing. But in that book, it's full of essays, and one of the essays, I'll micro it, but essentially what they were saying is that you're going to arrive wherever you arrive late, and that's fine. Because when you arrive, someone else is arriving late. And there will be, before you know it, a whole group of people that have arrived at the same time as you, who are interested in the same thing as you. If it's at a party, they'll be listening to the same music as you. They'll have the same interests. And before you know it, all of you are blossoming at the same time. And it's because you believe in who you are, what you are, and why you're doing it. When I first started talking about environmental issues, people were like, "Why are you doing that?" They were like, "This is crazy, stop it." And I was like, no, this is what I believe in. I was never trying to make money from it. I now have a career in the arts because of listening to what I knew was me. And now we're going through this crazy climate issue that everybody suddenly wanting to talk about it. And all of the brands, if they don't talk about climate issues, then they're not going to exist tomorrow. And so they're starting to employ artists who are not schooled and knowledgeable about what's going on and done the research, whereas I have. So when I'm then like kind of almost interviewed by a client, I can say to them, look, I'm not going to try and convince you that my work is the best. What I'm going to try and tell you is that I know what I'm talking about. Whereas other artists, I'm telling you, do not know what they're talking about. And I think it's imperative that you stick to your core and allow it to evolve and change. Don't be like stubborn about it and be like, oh, I said I'm going to do that 10 years ago and I'm never going to change. No, evolve. Like, man, we both evolved massively. If you stick to your core and who you are, maybe you dress differently to everyone else. So what? Be it. Do it. Allow it. Like, just explore who you are and let your art reflect that. And at some point, as you mature as an individual, as an artist, as the world changes around you, you'll be on point. So just don't try and copy what was the past, because the past will be extinct before you know it. And it's the future that is where we're going. So that would be my take out.
Yeah. And just to build on that, I always say, particularly my students, I say, when we were starting out and, you know, you had to go and see a client, you'd have a physical portfolio with plastic sleeves and you have your artwork in it, and it was heavy and it would, your shoulders would ache. That was a reality. And, you know, you get on the train or whatever and then you go and show the client physically your work. Those days are finished. If somebody wants to commission a creative, they can commission someone in Mexico City or Timbuktu or Iceland. You get access just through DMing a creative. You can see their work and contact them via DM within minutes. So it's a completely different marketplace. Now, that's not to make you overwhelmed, like, oh my gosh, how am I going to make my stuff stand out in this global marketplace? If you take what Louis said, is that in this world of social media, in this world of AI, the only thing that's unique is you. Like, you are unique. The way that you look at the world is unique. So if you can find a way of that being expressed through your creativity in the most honest way, then that's what's going to make you stand out. Standing out is what's going to lead to your success, whatever that means to you.
Love and compassion. That's what it is.
Peace and love.
One love.
So thank you both for joining us today in the studio. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for having us and getting us back together. Yeah. I haven't seen him for a year.
For more information on terms and conditions and licensing and contracts, AOI members can check out our website for resources on these topics, plus access to the pricing calculator tool, which assists in working out fee levels for quotes, including for site-specific commissions. Resources include a How to Get into Site-Specific Illustration, with lots of practical advice on murals. There are also lots of free resources for all illustrators to access. If you haven't heard them already, previous episodes of Inside Illustration on editorial, branding, and illustration for children are also available, with top guests giving lots of different practical information on the illustration world. Thank you for listening.